شعبان شهر شعبان شهر شعبان المعظم شهر شعبان شهر شعبان يا شهر رسول
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجهم والعن أعداءهم وقتلتهم وظالميهم ومخالفيهم أجمعين. السلام على علي الكبير. Salaam alaikum wa asadallah ayyamakum sa'ida. May Allah bestow you the most blessed and blissful nights as we're celebrating the A'yad al-Sha'baniyah. It is my sincere hope that you've been enjoying the programs that have been delivered to you through Imam Hussein TV. Tonight, I have the privilege, as with previous nights, to be joined here in the studio by Sheikh Vinay, and we shall be discussing some relevant issues and current issues, topical issues that you, it is our hope, will benefit from greatly, especially the youth. Assalamu alaikum, Shaykhuna. It's a pleasure to have you here.
Wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. The pleasure is all mine.
So, I think it's time we turn to the youth, and there's a lot to talk about the youth, especially as we're approaching the anniversary of the birthday of Ali Al-Akbar. Well, I like to use this phrase because in the Ziyarat al-Nahiya, the master of our time, Imam Mahdi, uses this way of sending salutation and salam to him. Anyway, the son of Imam Hussein alayhi salam. Well, obviously, he was not just a brave soldier or a military genius. We're talking about someone who was ashbahun nas bi Rasulullah khalqan wa khulqan wa mantiqan, meaning that he was most akin to the Prophet of Allah in appearance, mannerism, and also, I could say, rationalism or ideology. Loose translation, perhaps, for that phrase, but perhaps you can further explain what this particular and, of course, profound phrase means as uttered by Abu Abdullah al-Hussein on the day of Ashura. And then we'll take it from there to talk about some of the challenges that the youth are struggling with, particularly in the West, and what lessons can they learn from the behavior and the model that a son like Ali ibn al-Hussein al-Kabir can give us.
Inshallah. Well, I mean, to begin with, he was the son of Imam Hussein alayhi salam, as everybody knows, as obvious. And although he was not ma'asum, right, because Imam Zain al-Abidin was to be the Imam after Imam Hussein, not Ali Al-Akbar. But just because someone is not ma'asum does not mean that they cannot reach some of the highest level of spirituality underneath the Imam, of course, always underneath the Imam, never at the, no one can be like the ma'asum. But he was one of those people, and he was quite young. You know, according to most reports, in his early 20s, perhaps, maybe even some say 18, but he was young in comparison to the others. And he demonstrated that temperament of the Prophet throughout his life. I mean, what a description for the Imam of your time and your father to tell you that you are the most, that you look the closest to the Prophet physically. First of all, let's just focus on that for a moment. The Prophet was perfect in every way. His height, his facial features, his eyes, his nose, his hair, everything about the Prophet was perfectly proportioned. وَهُوَ أَشْبَهَ بِنَبِي خُلُقًا وَخَلْقًا. And he was, we'll get to khuluqan in a bit, but khalqan, just in his outer appearance. And whenever the ladies would crave to see or to remember the Prophet of Allah, they would look at Ali Al-Kabir or Ali Al-Akbar. And that would include someone like Sayyidah Zainab, who was old enough to remember the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Or perhaps whenever Imam Hussein would want to remember the Prophet himself, he would look at the face of his own son. That itself is not something to be taken lightly. That means there was a certain amount of divine blessings that were given to this child already. And then him being the most resembling of the Prophet in terms of his temperament is not meant to mean that Imam Hussein is not, of course. It's simply meant to mean that from among the family members, other than the Ma'asum Imam himself, this young man represents the manners, the love, the compassion, right? Last night we spoke about husn adab, right? So this connects, the hadith you've mentioned connects very well with the lesson about good akhlaq and good behavior that we spoke about last night with regards to Imam Zain al-Abidin Salatul Hukuk, and even the previous night about Abu Fadl Abbas and his wafa and his loyalty to Imam Hussein. Things like wafa and husn adab, well, wafa would be from husn adab, that loyalty would be from good akhlaq. Where all of these attributes were found in Ali Al-Akbar. It's very beautiful that one human being can have all of these attributes within him at such a young age. This is a combination of two things, of course. It's a combination of three things, rather, I would say. Three things. Firstly, Allah's divine blessing. That's always there. Number two, he had Imam Hussein as his father. That's something. That's, I mean, you have the master of martyrs as your father. And number three is he earned it. Mm-hmm. That's perhaps the most important thing, because he was a person who had free will. It's not that he was born with the khuluq of the Prophet. Mm-hmm. He's not a prophet. He's not Imam Amir al-Mu'mineen. He's not born with the khuluq of the Prophet. He's not a ma'asum, like Habib ibn Badr, like Abi Fadl, like Hazrat Abbas. They're not ma'asum. They're not born with this. They're not. They don't have a special Ruh al-Qudus or a sacred divine assistance that assists them. No, he had to earn that title. It's not something he's just simply born with, like completely born with and that's it. No, he lived out those things in terms of honoring his father, honoring his brothers, treating them with respect, all of those things. So one of the lessons we can learn from this right away is, as youth, as much as youth desire to be respected, and they should be respected, as we see examples of the life of the Prophet, where when he's passing water around in a room with great sahaba, with older sahaba, I believe it was Anas ibn Malik or Ibn Abbas was there. I mentioned in the earlier nights, yes. But for those who did not hear, it was either Anas ibn Malik or Ibn Abbas, as far as my memory goes, but it was a very young companion sitting next to him, very young, and the Prophet asked him, do you mind if I pass you over and give to an elder first water? Look at the Prophet, and I believe he said no or something like that. And the Prophet was not offended at all. Like, it's just a kid. It's just a child. There's nothing against that person. It's a child. And the Prophet was like, okay. Like, took him into account. And now imagine, this is the messenger of Allah, subhanahu wa ta'ala. The messenger of Allah. Would we respect a child in that way? So, I'm not saying that youth or younger people should not be respected. They must be. But also, in many occasions, that respect needs to be earned. What is your khuluq like? What is your behavior like? Does your behavior warrant that extra responsibility, that extra sense of, recognition, perhaps? Respect is something that's earned. It's not given. Basic respect has to be there for everybody. But to be given extra duties and extra responsibilities, let's say in the community or something like that, you have to prove yourself that you are responsible, you're trustworthy, you're on time. If you say you're going to be somewhere at a certain time, then be there at that time. And if you can't make it, you better let the person know ahead of time that you can't make it. These are all signs of responsibility, of husnul khuluq, of husnul adab, of good behavior. So Ali Al-Akbar, alayhi salam, had these attributes in him, but he also developed these attributes within him. Because we know not all children of the Masumeen were good.
Yes.
Children of prophets weren't necessarily all good. People have their own free will. Some people do good things, some people don't do good things. Bad and good. I mean, that's nature of the world in which we live. So youth, when they're desiring certain positions in the community or responsibilities within the family structure, need to also live up to
the standards and expectations.
The standards and expectations, right, that are expected of doing your work. If you say you're going to complete a task in the masjid, the person should not be calling you to remind you about it if it's not done. That's a sign of irresponsibility. If you have been given a certain amount of funds to manage and you are not able to account for how those funds are managed, that's a sign of irresponsibility. But from the other hand, the elders need to give the youngsters a chance to prove themselves. If you don't give somebody a chance to prove themselves, how are they going to prove themselves? And then how are they going to be able to lead our communities into the future?
They need to be given a sort of
our communities should not be graveyards. We have a place as a graveyard. The Mehfil is not a graveyard. We wish a long life for all our elders. But in Islam, we have to look to the hifd of the deen. Remember we spoke about the hifd of deen, the preservation of the religion. And we have to think 10, 20 years ahead, that long after we are gone from this world, meaning the elders. Although, I could just finish this program and go now, or even in the middle of the program. Allah knows best. All of us. But what will the deen look like? How will we preserve this religion 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, 50 years from now? These are all questions that need to be asked. And that's where the youth, by youth you could have any ages because they all have different groups, all the way up to 40, as we read in some traditions, you could still be a youth, need to be taken into account within the parameters of the teachings of Ahlul Bayt. Yes. But if we don't nurture them, develop them, train them, and guide them, and accept that they will make mistakes, and teach them instead of humiliating them, then we will inshallah be able to preserve this deen for our next generations.
That's a very critical point, I suppose, because the youth are generally, or by and large, characterized by pride or some sort of ego, and that should not be dented. We shouldn't really be touching some nerves. So we should be very sensitive and sensible in our treatment of the youth when we give them responsibility. And as you very astutely mentioned, we should acknowledge that well, they may make mistakes, but we should teach them to be, to be held accountable for their mistakes and learn from their mistakes and not to repeat them. That might be the point. So this is part of any system of education and training and nurturing, because if we
Ahsant.
humiliate them, belittle them, and break that sort of confidence, well, they may not try it next time.
Yeah, and I'm not talking about in the big communities or Ataba Abbasiya tomorrow is going to give the leadership, vice leadership over to like a 16-year-old. No, these are massive institutions. They have so much. I mean, that's not what I mean. I mean, small steps,
Yes.
And teach them how to manage. Pass on that wealth of experience that our elders have, who founded our communities. May Allah bless them all. All of them, our elders who founded these amazing communities in the West, whether it be in London, Toronto, New York, Orlando, Los Angeles, all these communities, Vancouver, to train the youngsters, those that are interested, inshallah, to train them and to give them that, put out the olive branch to them, and also be ready for change, my dear elders, my dear seniors. May Allah, give you all tawfiq to continue serving the deen and be ready for change. As long as that change is within the obligations of our religion and as taught to us by the Maraja al-Kiram. So we don't take everything into our own hands and just run with it and make the religion how we want. There are people that are a lot more learned than us, a lot more senior than us, a lot more wiser than us, people who have spent their whole life trying to protect this religion, right? So we also seek their advice, or we seek their trusted students' advice, those that are mas'ool, those that are trusted by them, to guide our communities into the future.
So by change, you're probably talking about, well, the changing face of the world, technology, and all of these things that are, emerging now and then.
Yeah.
So we need to have flexible methods of perhaps training and teaching the youth, and maybe, as we say, the digital generation are more into, perhaps, as just an example, social media and all of that. So we should just provide a variety of platforms and see which one really fits and which one really suits.
At the end of the day,
Yeah.
the objective is to obey Allah and His Messenger and the Masumeen and the family of the Prophet. Khalas. To obey them and to believe in them. And to follow the structure and the principles that they've taught us in terms of worship. So the salat, ziyarah, dua, that can't change. Marriage, tazweej, right? The act of marrying. There's no change in that. And then on the other hand, our belief system, our usul, tawheed, nabuwa, wilaya, ma'at, adala, so on and so forth. And the furu, those things don't change. Like, we're still going to pay religious taxes. We're still going to perform hajj. We're still going to do these things. Fine. But everything in between as to how those principles are promoted, taught, communicated, discussed, that's open for change. It has to be. If we all have the goal of preserving the deen and preparing at the imminent, we don't know when the Imam will return, but for the coming of our Imam, the return of our Imam rather, and his reappearance, then we're all on the same page. Now, we may have differences among one another as to how to go forward in that, and that's fine, because as they say in Arabic, everyone has their own drink. لِكُلِّ إِمْرَئٍ مَشْرَبٍ. Everyone has their own
way of thinking,
their own way of thinking,
taste,
and that's fine, providing we're on the same page.
Right.
Even if we have differences politically, that's fine too. Providing we never disrespect one another, we're on the same page. In terms of the things that I just described, right? We're all followers of Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam. So we have to, one, accept that there will be differences. And the elders have to accept that the youngsters may have a different way of looking at the same, of preserving the same principles. And they have to find a balance between the two. Mm-hmm. You have to. And
there should be some sort of a channel of negotiation.
And a channel of negotiation. And every community and society and association can develop that in their own way, at a small level, big level, however they want to do it. But it has to be done for the religion to preserve. And the youth have to develop that spiritual ability. And maybe that's something I think that's important to discuss, because I think one of the most important things, perhaps as important as practicing the wajibat, is believing in the wajibat. Perhaps you need to believe in them before even practicing them. That's a discussion on its own. But our belief in Allah has to be strong. Who is Allah? What is His right over us? You know, when Amir al-Mu'mineen says that I don't do anything, I don't remember if he says La af'alu wa la a'malu shay, but or ma amiltu shay, I didn't do anything. I don't remember which wording he used, but nevertheless it means to do or to act. Illa, except that I saw or see Allah qablahu fihi wa ba'da. Yani, I see Allah before it, in it, and after it. That is the martaba of Iman. Like, that is everything that we do. We see Allah before we do it. While we're doing it, Allah is pleased with us. After, now, when we look back on our life and we look back on what we did, we hope that Allah is pleased with what we've done. Or at least we should know He's not displeased with it, we hope. That level of thinking or way of seeing the world, that worldview, way of thinking, has to be nurtured. And it can't just be nurtured through lectures. It has to be nurtured individually.
Instilled within.
And that's where tarbiyatul awlad is so important. Raising, the way we raise our children and our youth, the way our communities interact with our youth, and also realizing that yes, the bar is high and they will miss it just like we do, and the doors of the masjid and the Husayniyah and the Mehfil and the Imam Barga, the center, are always open. No matter what, inshallah. That they're open to someone to return. We don't shut the door. And Imam Hussein alayhi salam, Ali Al-Kabir, salamullahi alayhima ijma'een, are the greatest example of that. I remember one of my teachers in the Hawza once told us, a very senior scholar, very senior alim from Iran. He said, even the drunkard comes for the majlis of Imam Hussein. And we looked at him and we said, like, I was very young in those days. Maybe it was, I don't know, it was a long time ago. It was like 15 years ago, maybe 16 years ago he said this. And he wasn't promoting this. He's saying, even the person that drinks alcohol normally, you would find him in the majlis of Abu Abdullah and the majlis of Ali Al-Akbar, where we remember his shahadat and his love for his father and his father's love for him. And some people ask him, like, even this person? He said, yes, because the Majlis of Imam Hussein is open to everybody, and it's a place of reform and the remembrance of Ali Al-Akbar, the youth that gave his life for his brothers and his father, most importantly for his father, his master, and for his brothers and for Islam, is a reminder to all the youngsters what they can achieve, what is possible for them to achieve in the name of Ali Al-Akbar as well. Even if they drank alcohol, that door of mercy of Allah is open. Alcohol being one of the worst and greatest sins in Islam.
Well, thank you very much. I think that's a big lesson that those responsible for religious associations need to really take it to their heart and practice that until they really find the right, perspective and how to do that. Inshallah. So after a short break, when our dear viewers will be watching all this beautiful scenery surrounding the shrines of Ahlul Bayt, Imam Hussein alayhi salam, and Abu al-Fazl Abbas's most loyal brother, we'll be back with you and continue this discussion. Thank you and stay tuned with us. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Thank you, dear viewers of Imam Hussein TV, for choosing this program to watch, as we have been discussing the great character of Ali Al-Akbar, the son of Imam Hussein, salawatullahi alayhima. May divine blessings, peace, and benediction be upon both. Well, speaking of drinking, now there are so many social challenges and let's say there's a lot of social misunderstanding, I suppose, between different groups of a given community, and all this well, any given society is multivocal. That's the nature of any society. But now all these challenges and all these social misunderstanding or the failure to establish proper communication and relationship with one another, how can we take a lesson from the character of Ali Al-Akbar as one who represented most closely the temperament of the Holy Prophet, sallallahu alaihi wasallam?
Well, simply he was a youth who did not give in to temptations. The temptations of life are everywhere around us. Now, yes, the temptations of that time and the temptations of this time are different, but they're still temptations. So think of it like this. Someone who gave in to a sinful temptation in those days, which could be, I don't know, it could be anything. It could be going to a music party. I mean, they had those in those days or something like that. I don't know. The way Allah would judge them is based on the context of that time and what that sin would mean at that time as well, right? And in our time, it's a different context. So in our time, those temptations are so many. And the challenge of the youths who are following in the path of Ali Al-Akbar are to resist those temptations. And then realize that as they start resisting those temptations, whether it be to, to see inappropriate things, whatever it is, things like that, they'll develop a strength in their heart. And as you do it once, twice, 3 times, 4 times, 5 times, you develop a spiritual strength within your heart.
Becomes habitual.
Becomes habitual in not doing that act. Or in avoiding the people who are associated with that act. Or avoiding those friends. I remember growing up, I had a friend, a very dear friend, his name was Ali. A lot of Alis. His name was Ali. And there was an attribute about him that I absolutely loved. He was always with his father. He was born in Canada, brought up in Canada. He's not from some foreign land. I would always find him with his father or with scholars or with older people. And I once asked him why. And he said, because I learned something. Not that he wouldn't hang out, he had his own friends, but he would always be with his father. And fathers should be like that with their sons and with their children. They should be such that the children want to spend time with them. And this young man, he died at the age of 25. May Allah's blessings be upon him. He used to recite Ziyarat Ashura every single day by heart after Salat al-Maghrib. Every single day. At least once a day, and I would see him after Salat al-Maghrib or Salat al-Isha. Every single day was Ziyarat Ashura by memory. Tawfiq.
Yes.
And he was born and brought up in the West. Yet he never had a inappropriate relationship with someone, with a non-mahram. He never got into drugs. He never got into alcohol or any of those vices. Was brought up in the West just like all of us, just like I was, at least not you, but just like me and probably many of the viewers of the show. Which means that it's not impossible. It's just a mindset you have to have. If you have certain things that are valuable to you, then you're going to hold on to those things that are valuable. And if your parents are Islamic role models, and inshallah they all are, they want the best for us, they want us to have good souls, then we try to spend time with our parents.
So parents play an important part here in terms of being encouraging and supportive of good behavior and good conduct, and
Absolutely.
perhaps setting a good example.
It's absolutely critical, right? It is absolutely critical. And, and also giving having other outlets for entertainment and fun, and and doing things with other families or with other people that won't take us astray or that won't maybe have a negative influence. Just paying a watchful eye to those things. Not to say we don't have relations with everybody. No, we can, our neighbors and everything, but our very, very, very close friends and inner circle should be those who we share some common, not some, most or all our common values with. That's a very good start to building, to getting used to not performing certain kinds of, indecent acts, whether it be going to indecent places or, performing indecent things.
So it's about who we hang out with. And,
especially when you have freedom.
We have,
especially when during the years of university.
Yeah.
High school is still a little bit more, there's still the teachers are watching. If you leave school, they'll call home. But in university, there's complete freedom. I don't know about Iran, but I know in the West, university is university. If nobody's going to call home to your mom that, Hassan didn't come for class today. That's up to you. You have the freedom. And you can choose for your university or college years to be an experience where you have partnership with other Muslims and followers of Ahlul Bayt, or you can choose for it to be a time where, God forbid, you go astray. You can join the Islamic organizations, do dua kumail, bring visiting speakers, and get involved in other things that are also very useful, like, student governance, whatever, donating your time, donating blood, doing volunteer work in the hospital, other things that are useful that keep you occupied, as opposed to just, like hanging out in a parking lot or something. Doing what, I don't know. Or, God forbid, going to some other place that is inappropriate, where a mu'min should not be going to, like a bar or, a nightclub or something like that, Yeah.
So, in other words, what makes the young perhaps more susceptible to conducting acts of indecency might be the freedom and their perhaps the very, very strong passions that they have at that particular age. And it is such that Allah rewards them, I think, most greatly for such acts, such decent and godly acts when they're young. And I think if we look at the proportions, we see that according to traditions, a young man is rewarded much more greatly than an elderly maybe performing the same, let's say, virtuous act. Am I correct?
Hassan, yeah. Because their temptations are so much more when they're younger, right? The desires. But that's why it's so important to keep busy. Be busy with your studies. Be busy with your activities. Be busy with your, being the best you can in your school, in volunteer work, volunteering at a hospital, volunteering to feed the homeless. My dear youth, give back to the community. Give back to the broader society, not only for Muslims, but non-Muslims as well. Be an ambassador of peace, an ambassador of help, an ambassador of compassion to all of humanity. And that was always a message of Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam. And if the youth keep themselves busy with these sorts of activities, then there won't be as much time or as much free moments to, get involved in things that they, that are not helpful to the soul. And then inshallah they can get married sooner.
Yeah, speaking of marriage, that can perhaps be another critical issue, especially in the West, how to let's say manage your marital life and your relationship with your spouse. I think that's also a very it's a very hot topic, let's say, in the West.
Oh yeah, very controversial, but it's a topic that elicits a lot of opinions, a lot of strong feelings about it. And I am truly of the belief, as someone who is, on the front lines, so to speak, is marriage requires maturity. Yes, to marry young is sunnah, but also to be mature. To be able to handle differences respectfully, with patience, to be able to be responsible. And it's a lifelong journey. It's not something that overnight, it's, my parents have been married for nearly 50 years, I think 48 or 49 years. And still, there's still stuff that they discuss. It's you can't look at it as being, okay, on day one, I need this and this done. Sometimes our youngsters, our youth want everything right away, right? Oh, I want to marry, I want a big house, I want a big car. Let's say the guy or the girl, whoever. It's not one or the other, I'm saying. And they'll realize that life's a journey, it's a process. You have to be patient. Patient with one another and patient with life, because life is going to throw at you all kinds of bala. That's the nature of dunya, of the world in which we live. And you have to be prepared for that, and that can't take your, life together off course. That requires maturity. And again, that maturity is developed through the years where they're being nurtured by their parents. That's why tarbiyatul awlad is so important. To have sabr, to have istiqamah, to have patience, forbearance, resilience,
in the face of troubles,
in the face of difficulties. Yeah, it's not easy. It's not easy at all. But marriage requires that. So it doesn't only require having the physical desire to marry. That is just one part of it. The bigger part is being able to
emotionally
and psychologically nurture that relationship, both parties.
To be in tune.
Be in tune, and if you're not in tune, to learn to be in tune with one another. To learn to be in tune with one another, right? Think of all these marriages of the past that were arranged. Did they have 1-2 years to get to know each other? I'm not saying that people should not get to know each other. I'm just saying, they learned how to make things work. About adapting. And it's hard sometimes. It is hard. I'm not saying it's easy. I'm just saying that relationships take a lot of work. And a youth that is used to pushing away their desires earlier on, whether it be a boy or a girl, a man or a woman, and they're nurtured by their parents to be responsible, inshallah will have an opportunity and a good married life, we hope. Inshallah.
Yes. And, we just have perhaps time for one more topic to discuss. So, shall I leave it to you, as this is going to be, unfortunately and sadly for me, the last night we have here.
Yeah, this is our Laylatul Wida.
Laylatul Wida.
This is our night of farewell, our farewell night between
really going to be missed here.
Firaq baini wa bainakum. This is our separation. Inshallah, we'll meet again soon. But, the other issue is how the political and social slogans of our day, movements of our day meaning of our time, affect the minds of our youngsters, or even our elders, I would say. Do we become sensitive or loving towards those acts that Allah has condemned in the Quran? Certain behaviors, certain kinds of ways of life that Allah and His Messenger have openly condemned. Sometimes when we're exposed repeatedly to something, unless we have a very strong belief, we have certainty, we understand it, that's different. But even with that, but to be constantly exposed to something, especially the new generation. See, I didn't grow up with a lot of this stuff, right? Like, a lot of this stuff was new to me later in life. So it's like, alhamdulillah, I had like 25 years of my life without a smartphone. 25 years of my life without a smartphone. Well, I only had a BlackBerry, which wasn't really that much of a smartphone at 25. I think it was like 27. I got my first, like, one of those touch phones and stuff. That's a big deal. So I had 27 years of my life without this stuff. So, I mean, social media, I wasn't bombarded by that stuff. So I guess that was a blessing in a way. But for those who are constantly scrolling through things, images, this and that, stop for a moment and ask yourself, what effect does it have on you? Mm-hmm. That's why I don't have social media on my phone. I don't keep it on my phone. I don't have it on my phone.
Yeah.
At least I don't think I do. I don't use it. If it's there, I don't even use it. I honestly don't use it on my phone. So it wastes my time. And you're just scrolling through image after image after image, and you think of what is that effect of that image, the surah, have on your soul. Everything we see, you know, like it's not to say we don't use social media, don't use this, don't use that, but in moderation. And then we have to ask ourselves more deeper questions, which is, if we're reading a certain article about a certain way of life or a certain thing about a certain way of life, does that desensitize us to the fact that that is something that is like that is a grave sin? Here I'm not talking about not wearing hijab and stuff like that. That's of course something that Allah doesn't like, it condemns, but for non-Muslims is different. But there are certain behaviors that are just so
widespread and commonplace,
repulsive, that just within you should dislike it when you see it. And those kinds of behaviors, I've seen among some of the youth a desensitization towards it. And that's troubling.
The taboo is gone.
That the taboo is gone. And you know you have a problem when even the heart stops disliking something. Because the least we could do is in our heart we dislike something. We don't even have to say it out loud what it is, but our heart can dislike it. And my advice or my reminder is to look within. If we believe in Allah truly, and we believe that He sent us a prophet, and we believe that He has revealed this Quran to this prophet, then in the name of all that is sacred, let's at least be honest in front of God. At least dislike something with our heart. And say that, you know what? Society has all kinds of colors. I know what I believe though. And I want to raise my family with those beliefs, with those practices.
So this is perhaps the least we can do. I mean, the lowest level of Amrun Ma'ruf and Nahy Anil Munkar.
Just dislike with the heart at least.
Dislike it with the heart. And that way perhaps...
and no one has to know, like, it's in your heart.
I mean, I think the Quran, commands us to قُوا أَنفُسَكُمْ وَأَهْلِيكُمْ نَارًا. So we should at least try to preserve our self. So at least we should try to preserve our souls and the ones of our family members, close kins, pure and let's say cleansed from the effects of certain egregious indecencies.
Again, it doesn't mean that we don't go out into the world. We do. We go out into the world, we mix with people, we engage in society, but we go with a strong soul. We go knowing what our beliefs are, knowing what our values are. Not going with our not knowing what our values are. That is very important, because that becomes our immunization, so to speak, inshallah.
Thank you very much, Sheikh. It was an amazing series of nights, and I'm sure that the viewers learned a lot from your lectures and this interaction. So thank you for staying with us until this moment. May Allah bless you for the rest of your life. And may Allah bless us with the tawfiq to serve you. Good night.
شهر شعبان